it's Mari McInerney from Tukaki here, and we're at the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Suicide Prevention Conference in Perth. And I'm talking with Matthew Tukaki from the Suicide Prevention Australia, Matthew, thanks very much for slipping out. What are your takeaways so far from the conference?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here as Chairman of Suicide Prevention Australia and a representative also of New Zealand Maori Council, so I get to play in both worlds. And one of the encouraging things that I've heard that was completely unexpected was co-design, the use of the word co-design. So when it comes to suicide prevention for Aboriginal people, Indigenous people, wherever they might be, no one's necessarily at the table co-designing anything. And in fact, what normally happens is we all tender for something once it's been designed. So obviously things are not working the way they should be or we need them to. Otherwise we wouldn't be in a conversation. So sitting at the table and co-designing with agencies and government and service providers what programs are going to be delivered into community gives Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people much more say about the programs that are being developed for them.
How do you differentiate co-design from Aboriginal-led solutions? What are you saying that's different there?
Well, it can be Aboriginal-led, but what needs to happen is at some point the funder or the primary partners need to be at the table as well. So for Māori in New Zealand, for example, a lot of it is established up here. We work on the programs through community engagement to feed into whether or not it's going to be acceptable into community, and then those are put to the government in terms of policy directions and objectives, and then programs have worked around that. So it definitely needs to be Aboriginal-led, but at some point co-design is working with all of those other organisations that have some role to play, and it's also about defining what their roles are. So instead of just being the service deliverer, well, actually you're not. You're a commissioning agent, so what are you commissioning? And in the design of that program, did any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people have a say in what the ultimate program would look like? And the answer traditionally is no.
And where you've heard from it, where did you hear it today? And why haven't we heard it routinely?
Well, interestingly, it was an LGBTIQ brother, boy and sister girl session upstairs in one of the small rooms. And they were talking about co-design of what children's services might look like in the state of Queensland. And actually that resonates with us in New Zealand under Section 7AA, which is about oranga tamariki. And so what I mean by that is, there are things that are happening in government legislation and policy that traditionally we haven't been involved in, yet impact our children. So that was the first one, sitting at the table with the government doing co-design. The second one was about co-design of community-based initiatives at just the service provider level. And that happened in another session in a small room, and so on and so forth. So they popped up in the most unusual of places. But I'm glad to hear it.
Fantastic. Now, what else? What are you looking to hear about for the remaining days? We're here for 3.5 more days.
Yeah, I think the focus needs to be and must be on empowering Aboriginal organisations and communities to be the primary provider of all services back into those communities. So the Minister said this morning that was definitely something they wanted to push. So the one thing I want everyone to leave here and know that they are empowered to lead that conversation, and not only lead it, but sit at the table in the design of it.
But then what actually has to be done to make that happen? Where does that come from? Your Minister's saying the good words?
Yeah.
Community wants it?
Yeah. So it's about holding the organisations to account. So in this case, the Minister gets up, he makes a wonderful speech. I know him, he's not a bad bloke at all, but he said something. Now what needs to happen is that needs to flow through to his leadership group within his departments and portfolios, and we need to, in reverse, hold them to account for the words that he's spoken. And this is where Suicide Prevention Australia comes into play. I would love to see more Indigenous organisations from the smallest of communities to the largest urban centres join so we can take up that fight for them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.